The biting Washington, D.C. wind howled like a banshee, whipping snow against the granite walls of the United States Secret Service headquarters. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the usual tension, amplified by the ferocity of the storm raging outside. Agents hunched over monitors, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of security feeds, while others barked orders into phones, their voices clipped and urgent. A low hum of anxiety thrummed through the building, a constant reminder of the lives they were sworn to protect. Then, the impossible happened. A sudden, jarring blare ripped through the tense quiet, the building's alarm system screaming red alert. Agents scrambled, adrenaline surging, weapons drawn as they braced for an attack. But the monitors remained blank. No sign of an intruder. A collective sigh of frustrated relief rippled through the room as the all-clear was sounded. A false alarm attributed to the storm's interference. Before the agents could fully return to their routines, the heavy, reinforced doors of the headquarters swung open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the swirling snow. Donald Trump, the former president, stepped inside, his presence electrifying the room. He was alone, no security detail, his trademark confidence radiating from him like heat from a furnace. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on the unexpected visitor. Agents froze mid-task, exchanging confused glances. No one had been notified of his arrival. A voice, finally breaking the stunned silence, belonged to a young agent named Miller. "Mr. Trump, what brings you here?" Trump scanned the room, his gaze sharp and penetrating, lingering on each face before settling on Miller. His voice, firm and unwavering, cut through the silence. "I need to find someone. An agent who saved my life years ago. But his name has been erased from every record. I won't leave here until I know the truth." A heavy silence settled over the room, thicker than the falling snow outside. Someone had saved Trump's life? And that person was deliberately removed from all official records? Was he searching for a forgotten hero? Or about to expose a secret that was never meant to be found? The question hung in the air, a chilling premonition of the storm that was about to break inside the Secret Service headquarters. "Tell me more, Mr. President," Jonathan Reyes, the director of the Secret Service, said, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. He was a seasoned leader, having served under multiple administrations, and he had seen more than his share of unusual events. But this, Trump walking into headquarters unannounced, demanding answers about a ghost from his past, this was unprecedented. Trump nodded, his gaze distant, as if peering into a long-forgotten memory. "It was 1982. He began, his voice softening slightly. "I was a young businessman, expanding my empire. Success, I thought, was measured in numbers, skyscrapers, million-dollar deals. I never imagined that one night, I'd be standing face to face with death." He paused, the room holding its breath, and began to recount the events of that fateful night in New York City. He had just left an important meeting and was driving home, unaware that he was being watched. As he turned into a narrow, dimly lit alley, an SUV suddenly swerved in front of him, blocking his path. Before he could react, 4 men emerged from the vehicle, all armed. "They threw me to the ground," Trump continued, his voice dropping lower, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. "One of them pressed a gun against my head. I remember exactly what he said." Trump clenched his jaw, the cold steel of the gun seemingly pressed against his skin once more. "You think you can walk into our world without paying the price?" "Trump?" Reyes frowned. "Do you know who they were?" Trump shook his head. "At the time, I had no idea, but later, I learned the truth. They were part of a powerful criminal organization, controlling entire industries in New York's underground. Without knowing it, I had stepped into their territory. And that night, they planned to teach me a lesson, or end my story for good." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "If it hadn't been for that man, I wouldn't be standing here today." The agents exchanged glances, the weight of Trump's words sinking in. A businessman, ambushed in the heart of New York, threatened with execution. This was no ordinary crime. It was a hit, orchestrated by forces far more dangerous. "What man, sir?" Reyes asked, his eyes searching Trump's face for any sign of hesitation. Trump took a deep breath, as if steadying himself before speaking. "Just when I thought it was over," a voice rang out from the darkness. He closed his eyes, reliving the moment. Drop your weapons. If you don't, there won't be a second warning. The tension in the room grew palpable. One of them laughed, tightened his grip on the trigger. But before he could pull it, a bullet tore through his hand. A gunshot echoed through the alley. And then, out of nowhere, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows, moving faster than anyone could react. Trump paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, eyes cold and sharp. He was an undercover Secret Service agent. Alone, he took on 4 armed men. Wounded, outnumbered, but he didn't stop. He pulled me up, dragged me into another alley, and got me out of there. Blood soaked through his coat. But he didn't care. He only cared about getting me to safety. The agent stood frozen, absorbing the weight of his words. When I tried to ask his name, he only said one thing: never let them win. I never saw him again. The next day, I tried to find out who he was. But no one knew. No records. No traces. It was as if he never existed. Director Reyes exchanged glances with several agents. Sir, do you remember anything else? Anything at all that could help us identify him? Trump nodded. He had a long scar on his left hand. I remember it clearly because when he pulled me to run, I saw it up close. And before he disappeared into the night, he said one name: Shadow One. The room went still. A few agents exchanged uneasy whispers. Reyes took a deep breath. Shadow One is not just a name. Sir. Trump narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Reyes crossed his arms, his voice lower, more serious. I've been in this agency for over 20 years. And that name, I've only heard it once in my entire career. It's a ghost story whispered in the dark corners of the agency. Trump held his gaze. I don't care what happened. I just want one thing. Find him. Or at least, find the truth. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Reyes gave a slow nod. If he ever existed, we'll find him. But deep down, Reyes knew that this search was not just about finding a man. It was about unlocking a door that many had tried to keep shut for decades. And once that door opened, no one could predict what would come next. Director Jonathan Reyes stood still for a moment before signaling to the agents in the room. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted, conversations halted, fingers flew across keyboards, and stacks of old files were pulled from archives. The search had begun. Everyone understood one thing: if the name, Shadow One, had been erased from history, this would not be an easy mission. Trump crossed his arms, his eyes locked on the computer screen as lines of data scrolled past. Tell me, Reyes, how does a man who saved my life disappear as if he never existed? Reyes didn't answer immediately. He turned to the agent handling classified records, a young man in a black suit with thick-rimmed glasses. Run a full personnel search. Cross-check every classified file, even those that have been encrypted or deleted under government orders. The agent nodded, fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. Strings of code flashed on the screen, searching through decades of government records. Then, after a long pause, he looked up, his face grim. There's nothing. No one under the alias, Shadow One. Any record of deep cover agents from the 1980s has either been sealed or completely wiped. If someone ever held that title, they didn't want to be found. Trump frowned. What about off-the-record files? Former agents who served but are no longer in the system. Reyes hesitated for a moment, then turned to a female agent standing in the corner. Get in touch with Michael Hayes. He worked in deep cover operations and retired in 1995. If anyone remembers Shadow One, it's him. An hour later, Trump and Reyes sat inside a reinforced SUV, driving toward a quiet suburban neighborhood in Virginia. Michael Hayes had once been a legend in the intelligence community. Now, he was just an aging man, living a reclusive life in a small, weathered house. Reyes knocked on the door. No answer. Trump glanced around. The house looked old, but the windows had reinforced locks. A man like Hayes wouldn't live without precautions. Reyes knocked harder. Michael, open the door. We need to talk. A deep, raspy voice came from inside. Go away. I don't have anything to do with you people anymore. Trump took a step forward, his voice firm but laced with sincerity. This isn't about you. It's about a man who disappeared. A Secret Service agent once known as Shadow One. Inside, there was silence. Then, A soft click. The door creaked open slightly, revealing Michael Hayes. Though well into his 60s, he still carried the presence of a man who had spent his life in the shadows. His sharp eyes studied Trump, but there was something else beneath them, something that told Trump this man had seen more than anyone should ever have to bear. Hayes crossed his arms, his voice edged with skepticism. If you're here asking about Shadow One, that means you're either incredibly stupid, or you have no idea what you're walking into. Reyes spoke calmly but firmly. Tell us the truth. Hayes exhaled heavily, then stepped back and motioned for them to come inside. The living room was small, cluttered with old papers and faded photographs lining the walls. Trump's gaze moved across them until it landed on one particular photo, an old group picture of agents in black suits standing in formation. Faces stern and composed, but one man stood slightly apart, his eyes not focused on the camera. Trump pointed at him. Is that him? Hayes remained silent for a long moment, then finally nodded. Yes, but his name wasn't always Shadow One. He had a real name once, though by now, I doubt anyone remembers it. Reyes spoke slowly, deliberately. We need to find him. Hayes locked eyes with Trump. If you're serious about finding him, remember this. There's a reason he disappeared. And if you start digging into this past, there will be people who don't want you to find the truth. Trump didn't flinch. I owe him my life. No matter who I have to face, I won't stop. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then let out a heavy sigh. He stood up, disappeared into another room, and returned holding a worn-out envelope, sealed in protective plastic. He set it on the table. This is all I have left of him. But be careful, Trump. Some debts are too great to be repaid without consequences. Trump took the envelope and slowly opened it. Inside was an old photograph, the edges frayed with time, and a classified government file, still stamped with an official seal. The secret of Shadow One was about to be uncovered. He carefully opened it, revealing an old, worn photograph. In the picture, a man in a black suit stood among a group of Secret Service agents. But unlike the others, his sharp eyes weren't looking at the camera. He was watching something beyond the frame, as if anticipating a threat no one else could see. Faintly printed below the image were the words, David Cole, United States Secret Service. Trump turned to Michael Hayes, his voice slow but firm. Is this him? Hayes nodded. His real name was David Cole, one of the best agents I ever knew. But he wasn't just any agent. Reyes frowned. Hayes took a deep breath, his aging eyes reflecting a weight only a few could understand. David didn't just work for the Secret Service. He infiltrated one of the most powerful criminal syndicates in the country. He took on assignments no one else dared to. He gathered evidence of corruption at the highest levels, illegal deals between the government and underground organizations. Trump tightened his grip on the photograph. So that's why he was erased from the system. Hayes nodded. No one wanted a man like David Cole to exist. The people in power made sure his name would never appear in any official record. Reyes crossed his arms, his voice low and steady. If he's still alive, why hasn't anyone been able to find him? Hayes locked eyes with Trump. Because he doesn't want to be found. Or worse, someone made sure he never would be. Silence filled the room. Then, Trump rose from his chair, determination burning in his eyes. We're going to find him. Hayes exhaled heavily. If you're that determined, I have a lead, but it's not safe. Trump didn't hesitate. I don't care. 3 days later, Trump and Reyes arrived at a remote area on the outskirts of Chicago. The night was bitterly cold, the wind sharp as a knife, and the narrow dirt road led them deep into a dense forest, where a small wooden cabin stood in isolation. Reyes instinctively reached for the firearm at his waist, then motioned for Trump to stay back. We don't know who's in there. Let me go in first. Trump shook his head. I'll speak to him myself. They approached the door. Reyes knocked firmly 3 times. No answer. Trump stepped forward, his voice cutting through the darkness. David Cole, I know you're in there. Silence. Then, a faint click. The door creaked open just slightly, and a pair of wary, aged eyes peered out from the shadows. David Cole. His face was gaunt, his beard streaked with silver, his frame leaner than the man in the photograph. But his eyes, those same piercing, Battle-hardened eyes had not changed. He was still a man who had once stood at the edge of life and death. Trump met his gaze, unwavering. "I've been looking for you for 40 years. David remained silent for a long moment, then slowly pushed the door open wider. "If you've made it this far, it means you truly want answers." Inside the cabin, the dim glow of an old lamp cast long shadows across the room. Stacks of yellowed newspapers and scattered documents covered the table, the headlines revealing traces of past political scandals. Names Trump recognized, yet details he had never seen made public. David sat down, his eyes never leaving Trump. "I saved you that night because I knew if you died, the story would end there. But I never expected you'd be the one to come looking for me." Trump clenched his fist. "Why did you disappear?" David let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Because I got too close to the truth. I held evidence no one wanted to see. And when I was ready to expose it, they set me up. A staged attack, a secret arrest warrant, and overnight, I became no one." Trump's voice dropped, steady and resolute. "I can't change the past. But I can fix what was done to you." David raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly do you think you can do?" Trump rose from his seat, determination burning in his eyes. "I will bring your name back. I will make sure the world knows who you were and what you did." David shook his head. "You don't understand, Trump. The people behind this, they still hold power. If you dig up the past, you won't just be putting me in danger, you'll be risking yourself too." Trump held his gaze, unwavering. "I'm not afraid." A long silence filled the room. Then, David exhaled, as if releasing the weight of 40 years. He stood up, walked toward an old wooden cabinet in the corner, and pulled it open. From inside, he retrieved a small metal box, setting it on the table in front of Trump. "If you're really going to do this, then here's everything I've kept for 40 years. Trump unlocked the box. Inside were classified documents, audio recordings, and photographs, evidence of everything David had uncovered before he vanished. Reyes scanned the files, his expression shifting. He turned to Trump, his voice barely a whisper. "If this is real, it could change everything." Trump nodded, his resolve unshaken. "Then we're doing it." David studied him for a moment. Then, for the first time in their conversation, he smiled. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Trump's response was simple, yet unwavering. "Men like you don't deserve to be forgotten. And I'll make sure that never happens." The battle to bring the truth into the light had officially begun. The cabin felt charged with the weight of decades of secrets, the air thick with anticipation and a sense of impending danger. David Cole sat in his small cabin, staring at the metal box on the table. Inside it lay a part of his life that had been buried. A past filled with secrets that could change everything. For 40 years, no one had dared to touch it. No one had dared to speak the truth. Now, the possibility of exposure loomed, promising both liberation and peril. Trump stood beside him, his gaze unwavering. "If you're ready, I'll make sure the world knows what happened." David slowly closed the box. "Once this gets out, there's no turning back." Trump didn't blink. "I've never been one to back down." Silence filled the room. Then, after a long pause, David gave a slow nod. "All right, let's do this." 4 days later, in Washington, D.C., a press conference was held right in front of the United States Secret Service headquarters. Cameras from every major news outlet focused on the podium. Trump stepped forward, his demeanor serious and resolute. Behind him, slightly to the side, David Cole stood in silence, facing the public for the first time in 4 decades. Trump scanned the crowd, then spoke, his voice unwavering. "Today, I stand here to tell the story of a man America should never have forgotten. A man who was willing to sacrifice everything for justice, only to be erased from history. A man named..." The entire room went silent, every reporter leaning forward, their pens poised to capture every word. Trump continued, his voice filled with righteous indignation. "David Cole, a former Secret Service agent, dedicated his entire career to fighting against corruption and evil. But when he got too close to the truth, those in power made him disappear. They thought that by erasing his name from every record, they could make the world forget him. But today, I stand here to tell them, they were wrong." He turned to David, his gaze filled with respect. You were forced to live in the shadows for too long. But from this moment forward, America will remember your name." David looked at Trump, saying nothing, but in his eyes, something had shifted. A weight lifted, a sense of relief he hadn't felt in 40 years. A single tear trickled down his weathered cheek. Trump proceeded to lay out the evidence. The contents of the metal box brought to life with chilling detail. He spoke of the criminal syndicate, their control over industries, and their ties to powerful figures within the government. He spoke of David's bravery, his unwavering commitment to justice, and the price he had paid for daring to expose the truth. The room crackled with energy. Reporters scribbling furiously, cameras flashing, their lenses hungry for every detail. The revelations were explosive, shaking the foundations of the established order. Questions erupted from the crowd, a chaotic chorus of disbelief and outrage. "Mr. Trump, is this true? Do you have proof? Mr. Cole, what do you have to say for yourself? Mr. President, what are the names of the individuals involved?" Trump held up his hand, silencing the clamor. "The evidence speaks for itself. The investigation will reveal the truth. Justice will be served." The next day, the story of David Cole dominated the headlines. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of public outrage and demands for justice. The individuals implicated in the scandal scrambled to defend themselves, issuing denials and launching counterattacks. But the evidence was overwhelming. The sitting president, caught in the crossfire, was forced to act. He immediately launched an independent investigation, vowing to uncover the truth and hold those responsible accountable. Those accused of corruption started falling like dominoes. Arrests were made, resignations tendered, and reputations shattered. The carefully constructed edifice of power that had protected them for so long began to crumble. Amidst the chaos, one thing remained clear: David Cole had been vindicated. His name, once erased from history, was now synonymous with courage and integrity. The quiet cabin in the woods, a place of refuge and exile, became a symbol of resilience and hope. The investigation into the scandal dragged on for months, uncovering a web of corruption that extended far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. The sitting president signed a special executive order. David Cole's honor was officially restored. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest honors a U.S. citizen could receive. A ceremony was held at the Secret Service headquarters, a place that had once denied his existence. David's name was engraved on the Wall of Honor alongside other agents who had dedicated their lives to protecting the nation, a testament to his bravery and sacrifice. As David stepped forward to receive the medal, the entire hall rose to their feet, applauding. He was no longer a ghost, a forgotten footnote in history. He was a hero. And finally, America knew it. Trump, standing beside David, clasped his hand warmly. "You have waited long enough, David." But Trump wasn't done yet. 1 week later, the David Cole Foundation was established, a scholarship fund dedicated to supporting former agents and their families in times of hardship, ensuring that their sacrifices would never be forgotten. News stations across the country reported on the event, and David Cole's story spread like wildfire. Other forgotten agents, those who had sacrificed in silence, were finally being remembered, their stories being told. David stood by the window of his small home, watching the golden sunlight filter through the glass. For the first time in years, he felt like he truly existed, no longer a phantom haunting the margins of society. The years of isolation and hardship had taken their toll, but his eyes still held that same piercing intensity, that same unwavering commitment to justice that had defined his life. As Trump prepared to leave after a final visit, David spoke only one sentence, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you, Trump, not for the honor, but for remembering me." Trump simply nodded, his expression sincere. "Men like you should never be forgotten." And with that, he walked away, leaving behind a man, a story, and a legacy that the world would never forget. David Cole's story is more than just the tale of a forgotten agent. It is a reminder that in the face of power and silence, there are still those who stand for justice. But more importantly, it shows us that a single act of kindness and an overdue thank you can change the course of someone's life. David Cole dedicated his entire life to protecting his country. Yet for 40 years, no one knew of his sacrifice. If Trump hadn't searched for him, his story might have remained buried forever. How many others out there have given everything yet never been recognized? How many heroes have gone unnoticed, their legacies fading into silence? Today, we may not be fighting great battles, but every day we have the chance to remember and honor those who have sacrificed for us. People like David Cole. If someone has ever helped you, find them, thank them before it's too late. Don't let their kindness, their sacrifice, be forgotten. And if this story moved you, share it. Let more people know that justice exists only when someone is brave enough to stand up for it. Together, we can keep stories like this alive. This is just a first draft, of course. Feel free to modify and adjust it to better fit your vision for the story. I tried to incorporate as many elements as possible, including suspense, emotional moments, and a positive, meaningful message. I hope you find it useful. Good luck with your writing.